Today we will discuss three models introduced by Jim Cummins with regards to proficiency. First is common underlying proficiency. Second is basic interpersonal communication skills. And the third is cognitive academic language proficiency. Let's first discuss common underlying proficiency. Cummins and Swain proposed a common underlying proficiency model for first and second language proficiency. Now, as you can see, it's called common underlying proficiency, common underlying. What happens underneath the surface representation of a language, the process that basically functions underneath is common as far as the first language is concerned and the second language proficiency is concerned. People who are learning second language possess common underlying proficiency. It's a framework of language structures and functions driven from a person's own language and knowledge of one language which can help him to develop or learn second language. Now, this particular model, which says that there's a common underlying proficiency, is basically consists of one's own understanding of one's own language structure and features, because it relies on the framework of that structures and feature, and that knowledge or that understanding of that framework basically enables a person to develop a proficiency in this second language as well. You have an image in front of you where you can see the iceberg analogy. Now, where you see that this is first language and this is the second language. This is the surface features, the actual representation of their specific language, the first language and the second language. And this is basically common underlying proficiency, works on the basis of central operating system. So what are these features? It says that the CUP model is represented with the dual iceberg metaphor and is the basis of the hypothesis called interdependence hypothesis. Now you see that at the surface level, the two languages are different from each other. The structure or features of first language are distinctively represented and the structure and features of second language are distinctively represented. But underneath, there is this common underlying proficiency, which means the relationship or interdependency of two language framework, which actually enables a learner, or basically the understanding of this particular area enables the learner to develop this particular area. So it says the relationship of first language to the learning of another language, different on the above surface, but is actually interdependent psychologically. That is where the second language surface features get facilitated or get motivated. Every language contains surface feature, however, underlying those surfaces are the representation of proficiencies that are common across languages, which means that the process which helps to develop a proficiency is common in all languages. Based on meaningful exposure and experience with two languages, bilingual or multilingual, people who can speak more than one language, develop common underlying proficiency skills, which enable the development of cognitive and academic skills in both languages. So we see that based on the meaningful exposure or the experiences that a person has with regard to the exposure to the first as well as the second language, they develop this common underlying proficiency, which further helps them to enhance their cognitive process and develop academic skills. With effective usage, individuals' two languages are observed to be interdependent and come to exist within one central processing system. So, effective usage of particular language basically help individuals to develop the second language proficiency based on the understanding and knowledge of the proficiency that they have in their first language, and that basically takes place, so that happens through central processing system, which lies underneath the actual or the representation of the linguistic rules. Here in front of you, you have this image where you see two pictures. One is separate underlying proficiency versus common underlying proficiency. Now, separate underlying proficiency, you will see two blocks. Now, here in this picture, you will see that under separate underlying proficiency, both languages are represented or present separately from each other. They are stored separately. Increase in one language will result in a loss of some of the other. So if one area is emphasized or one area is paid more attention to, what happens is that the other area is neglected because the representation are there separately. But in common underlying proficiency, you will see that both languages are merged and do not function independently of each other. So basically, this area is the common underlying proficiency area which facilitate first language as well as the second language because they both interdependently function. According to separate underlying proficiency, no relationship exists between the first and other language, and that languages work independently in the central processing. If a learner is being taught in the primary language, then it becomes more difficult to learn any other. Because if one area is highlighted or one area is emphasized more, then it is going to create problem for a learner to develop proficiency in this second language. According to this common underlying proficiency, learners will not have to relearn some of the basics of schooling because this is something they have already established or acquired in their first language proficiency. The threshold hypothesis assumes that a child needs to achieve a certain level of proficiency or competence in the first or second language to take advantage of the benefits of bilingualism. So there is a requirement that a child needs to achieve a certain level of competence or proficiency in order to attain the maximum benefit as far as the development of proficiency in the second language is concerned. High levels of proficiency in both language is definitely going to increase the cognitive flexibility, and the lower proficiency in both languages results in cognitive deficiency. So two types of bilingualism processes are introduced, additive as well as subtractive bilingualism. Additive bilingualism, basically a process which involves adding a second language and not replacing. Learners develop both fluency and proficiency in the second language while continuing to develop proficiency. So material is added, information is added, and there is no replacement. Total additive bilingualism occurs when one is highly proficient in both cognitive and academic aspects. Subtractive is where some of the linguistic features or vocabulary are subtracted or reduced. Language learners completely immerse themselves in the culture or second language, whereby neglecting some of the features of his or her own mother tongue or first language, the learning of second language interferes with the learning of first language. So in the subtractive bilingualism, this is what happens, that some of the linguistic features are reduced, whereas in additive bilingualism, there is addition of second language features. To conclude, common underlying proficiency model claims that proficiencies that involve more cognitively demanding tasks such as literacy, content learning, abstract thinking, and problem solving are common across languages, whereas separate underlying proficiency refers to the notion that languages work independently in the central processing system. And then you have this additive bilingualism and the subtractive bilingualism introduced by Cummins as two distinctive processes of bilingualism.